I got interested in animation. It basically came out of my comic book background. I worked for several years at Marvel Comics, and then I worked at DC Comics, and I really liked the visual format, but I sort of felt like I reached a point where I wanted to get beyond. I felt like I needed three dimensions. I wanted sound, I wanted motion. I wanted to get beyond like the comic book still picture thing. Although I think that's a really good medium, just animation, I just sort of felt like I was ready to move into a little more dimensionality. I had met Steve Gerber through my comic book years. I met him at Marvel years ago, and we were very good friends. And he was sort of a mentor of sorts in the sense that he sort of expanded my horizons, I think. I came from a smaller town, and Steve, he came from St. Louis, but then he'd been in New York for a few years when I met him. And when he was working out here for Ruby Spears for a while, he did Plastic Man, he did Thundar the Barbarian, and when he was working on G.I. Joe, he asked me if I was interested in doing a couple of scripts for G.I. Joe. And I knew from what he told me, his experience at working at Sunbow was very good, that he really enjoyed working with the people. He really felt like he had a lot of creative freedom. And they seemed to be engendering the kind of environment that we used to enjoy at Marvel when we both worked there. The idea of moving from hard action voice stuff to the Jem stuff I actually like, because I've always believed in character-driven stories, and it was always the type of emotional things that I like to do. When I was at DC Comics, I wrote the Omega Men, which was based on a group of characters that were sort of not quite a group. I mean, they didn't quite get along, and but they sort of fought and had, sort of like problems within their group and everything. So I was always more into the emotional connections of the characters anyway. So to me, it was kind of a relief after having produced Transformers and worked on G.I. Joe and some of these other shows that were more hard-edged, to do something that was more about character and more about the relationships between people and sort of familial relationships, with Jem and her sister, and the whole kind of group rock and roll thing. And and again, the idea of working on a rock and roll series, it was also kind of fun, because that was very much out of the norm of what people did. I mean, the music, a lot of times the music and animation tended to be just sort of like very kind of backgroundy, droney, kind of not terribly interesting stuff. And the idea that we could actually use real composers and hire musicians and really try to do music video segments, which we didn't, I think Christy mentioned in one of her pieces that was a very new thing at the time, that MTV hadn't been around that long. And now, of course, everybody has done music videos, and MTV hardly does them anymore, and, but it was a lot of fun. Kenner and Bryant were like just a great team and did a great job composing a lot of the songs. And, as we got later in the series and we started doing things that were more, sometimes we do like a 50s type sound, or we do jazz, or we do, we just did like a whole, we sort of ran the gamut of the types of songs and the type of material we were doing, while still kind of keeping it within our format. Well, the good thing about Hasbro, and my experience there was, I know that they've always, a lot of the fans and everything sort of felt that, Hasbro is like shoving this down our throats and everything. But for the most part, what they cared about is that the characters, or the figures that they were presenting got enough exposure so that when their toys were out there, that people would recognize the figures. But aside from sort of the very beginning, when they sort of set the basic concept in place, and decided they wanted to do, I think, the Good Girl versus Bad Girl, I think, came from Hasbro, a Good Girl band versus Bad Girl band. Day to day, they weren't really that involved. I mean, they're worried. They would get more concerned if there was something they thought might threaten the image of the figure or something, or threaten their kind of corporate image. But they really weren't that involved in the day-to-day creative. Again, as long as we were using the characters that they gave us and giving enough exposure to the different characters, that's all they really seem to be concerned about. Yeah, I think there's something about that show that does appeal to young girls. I mean, I think that there's a lot of elements to it. I mean, I think the fashion element is certainly good. We had a very good fashion person on the show. Deborah Pugh was terrific at coming up with outfits and things, designs that weren't just the toy designs and things. I think that certainly in my shows, I try to do things that was sort of more universal, like Father's Day, which I think we're going to talk about later on. It's something that, every girl has a relationship with her father. Every girl, has, kind of a special place in her heart for her dad. And I think that there are a lot of elements that just have a lot of appeal to them. And I think, again, pink hair never hurts. I just think there was a lot of stuff, I think that the conflict between the two bands was good. I mean, I think people always like to see competition. I think also a lot of people like the bad girl bands, I'm always a fan of the bad girls, so it was fun to, to have that element in there. I think it made it more lively and more interesting than just, boring set of characters. I think all the Misfits were fun. We were so busy in those days. I think our peak season at Sunbow, we were doing something like 200 half hours of animation, and we had 3 movies going. We were doing the G.I. Joe movie, the Transformer movie, and the My Little Pony movie. So we were all like very busy. I mean, I remember I was working on a draft of the G.I. Joe script for the movie when I was at a voice session for My Little Pony. So there was like a lot of stuff going on. The interesting thing about the Jem Show too was they were actually approached at one point by ABC, who wanted to do a network version of the show. And at the time, they really felt a lot of loyalty to the syndicators who were actually syndicating the Jem Show. And these days, of course, all the syndicators have been bought up by other networks anyway, so it doesn't really exist. But they actually turned ABC down from doing a network version of the show because they felt a loyalty to the syndicators. And I think, again, that was sort of in their nature. I mean, I think they had the loyalty to the people who worked with them. I think they respected the people that worked with them. I think, it was a tremendous success for everybody involved, and it was wonderful. So, and then I got to do kind of a second go-round after there was a few years where they didn't do a lot of animation, and then they came back and did Conan, and they did Bucky O'Hare, and my phone rang again, and even though I was out here in LA, I had such a good working relationship with them, I could just do what I was doing for them in New York from out here. So, it's just a great bunch of people. It's, again, probably the best experience I've had, animation, comic books, anywhere.